Coming up on Network Africa, South Africa's President Cyril Ramaphosa calls for unity as his African National Congress party loses its majority in parliament. Nigerian workers down tools across the nation as the country's Labour and Trade Union Congress begin nationwide strike. Plus, UN humanitarians warn famine in Sudan is imminent if aid agencies are not allowed to provide relief. Hello and welcome to the program this week. I'm Layo Olarinde. We begin here in Nigeria, where labor unions have made true to their threat to embark on a nationwide strike, as no fewer than 15 unions that are affiliates of the Nigeria Labour Congress and the Trade Union Congress have directed their members to fully comply with the directives to down tools beginning from today. Some of the circulars cited by our labor correspondent include those from the Medical and Health Workers Union, the Judiciary Staff Union of Nigeria, the Maritime Workers Union of the country, and the National Union of Food, Beverage and Tobacco Employees, which all directed members to fully enforce the industrial action. Well, let's take a look at the situation in some states in the southwest region of the country.
In Lagos, the strike is taking full effect as government offices are shut. In Alausa, where most state government offices are located, workers are locked out and business activities grounded. The impact is being felt most especially at the airports, with flight disruptions as aviation workers picketed the domestic wing of the Murtala Mohammed Airport. No flights were allowed to take off. All other businesses with union representatives are affected by the strike.
As you can see, we've locked the gates for people, staff that are under level 14. The 14 and above are in there working. And you can see this to us. I'm giving you the news of what is happening on the road and what is happening across the state, so that you can have an idea of what the strike is all about and before people want to get information.
Still in the southwest, in Ogun State, the Federal Secretariat at Abeokuta in the Ogun State capital is under lock and key as workers stayed away from office in compliance with directives of the national leaderships of the NLC and TUC.
Nigerian populace are waiting for living wage. Everybody now, we are waiting for the pronouncement and the declaration of right for the President of the Republic to announce the living wage, because I want to tell you, it is on living wage that every soul will live on.
In Oyo State, many public school students in Ibadan, the state capital, were turned back by their teachers in the early hours of the day in compliance to the strike action. Banks and other financial institutions were seen running skeletal services as their gates remain closed to usual businesses. The government secretariat at Agodi also showed a very low turnout of workers, as most of those present are senior civil servants.
Solidarity forever, for the union makes us strong.
Further south, the workforce in Ondo State are complying with the nationwide strike. Leaders of the labor unions converged in Akure, the state capital, where they expressed confidence in the level of compliance in the state.
We never see any government that wake up one day and tell you that it's increasing your wage. No, we fight tooth and nail to get all those things. There's nothing the government will give to you free. They will never. So that is why the workers knew all this, that it's only labor leaders that can save them from the hands of these politicians or government, whichever we can call them.
The level of compliance in the state, both in public and private sector, at least Presently, I can tell you that it's 80%.
Unless something significant happens, the labor unions vow to continue their strike action while monitoring the level of compliance in government offices as the labor leaders continue to enforce the strike.
South Africa's election has come and gone, leaving the ruling party African National Congress at a loss. For the first time in 30 years, the ANC has lost its majority in parliament and is seeking for a coalition in government. Now, after results were announced on Sunday, President Cyril Ramaphosa called on the country's political parties to work together for the good of the country, as final results from last week's election confirmed what many analysts had predicted, a losing majority. Well, voters slashed support for the ANC to 40.2%, down from 57.5% in the 2019 parliamentary vote. The main opposition party, the Democratic Alliance, DA, had 21.6%, and Umkhonto weSizwe, MK party, the new party led by former President Jacob Zuma, managed to grab 14.7%, pulling away votes from the ANC. Official results showed the ANC winning 159 seats in the 400-seat National Assembly, down from 230 previously.
We want to thank the staff and leadership of the Independent Electoral Commission, who have worked tirelessly to ensure the success of these elections, often under very trying and difficult conditions. We will always have different views. We will always have problems that we will raise. What our people expect of all of us is to work together to find solutions in a peaceful manner in accordance with our laws.
Well, after months of preparation, the Independent Electoral Commission, IEC, in South Africa provided their final update, informing South Africans of the official numbers of May 29th's election. Now, this was despite numerous disputes over election process discrepancies and calls to delay the announcement. Well, the IEC went ahead and released the final tally. South Africa's ruling ANC is now searching for allies to form a new government after losing its 3-decade-old absolute majority in the election. Our South Africa correspondent, Innocent Samosa, has more.
A room full of worry, but also a room full of excitement for some, as political party leaders stand at the forefront, embodying the hopes and ambitions of their supporters. In contrast, the air is thick with tension and concern for others. Nervous glazes and hushed conversations reveal the uncertainty about what lies ahead as coalition talks and negotiations intensify behind closed doors. Chief Electoral Officer Sai Mamabolo declared the elections free and fair.
Indeed, this was a theater of openness. As has been the case in the past 30 years, our democracy has spoken.
The future is uncertain. What happens next remains a question mark as parties strategize and maneuver for power. Regarding the best coalition scenarios for South Africa, political analyst Lukhona Mguni had this to say.
Very difficult to say because, political parties have to make two calculations. Which coalition is in the best interest for the country, but which coalition is also in the best interest for them as political parties. I think in so far as what is in the best interest of the country, if you think about the press briefing that the former President Jacob Zuma had last night here in this venue, where effectively Umkhonto weSizwe party is disputing the entire election.
Meanwhile, political analyst Sanusha Naidu says it's difficult to determine which political party would be the best fit for South Africa.
I think that's the million-dollar bet right now. We don't know which one. I mean, I think, at this point in time, we don't have legislation that kind of defines what a coalition strategy or framework should look like. But at the same time, we're leaving it up to these political parties who have been in this kind of very, very competitive and combatant relationship. And I feel that somehow gets caught up more than what it is. I hope that sanity prevails, maturity prevails, and I hope they think of South Africans who voted and stood in the long queues as opposed to what their vested interests are.
The African National Congress is seeking a coalition partner. The EFF has stated that it can work with the ANC under 3 conditions: the resignation of President Cyril Ramaphosa, control of Finance Department portfolio, and the position of Speaker of the National Assembly. Meanwhile, for now, the Democratic Alliance aligns with the multi-party charter. It's clear that South Africa's political landscape is set for a significant change. From Johannesburg, South Africa, Innocent Samosa, Channels Television News.
Well, joining us now is Professor Nsikelelo Breakfast, political analyst from Eastern Cape, for more on the elections. Thank you, Professor, for your time on the program.
Thank you very much for having me.
Well, can you help us understand what is at stake right now for the African National Congress? It's the first time in 30 years the party is losing its majority and seeking a coalition.
Well, first of all, one-party dominance is a thing of the past, and the hegemony of the ruling party has been dealt with a blow in a big way. And that has created a scope for negotiations. The Constitution of the Republic of South Africa, as it stands, it makes a provision that political parties have 14 days to constitute government. So that is about 2 weeks. The challenge is that the founding fathers and mothers of our democracy, I think when they formulated the Constitution, it never crossed their minds that the ANC at some point will be out of power because of the time frame that the Constitution provides for, which is very short. Because when you draw from international best practices, like for instance, if you look at countries like Germany, France, Norway, the list is endless. They normally have about 3 months or more than that to start with the negotiations. So that's the challenge that we have at the moment. But the other challenge is that coalitions in South Africa at local government level have been unstable and unworkable, largely because we don't have a framework to guide them. So I think we need to have a legislation that will make political parties to abide by the decisions that are made by other partners, so that we can have stability. Because we've seen of late that these coalition arrangements, they tend to scare, investors, because, investors normally, they look for political stability.
Yes, indeed, Professor. You mentioned that 14 days is what they have right now, and that's a short time frame. So how difficult do you think the journey ahead in terms of getting a coalition government is?
Yeah, I think it's going to be very difficult because there's a tendency to see negotiations as a win-lose situation as opposed to a win-win situation. Sometimes coalition partners or people who are negotiating for a coalition arrangement, they have a winner-takes-all mentality of a zero-sum game, as opposed to having a win-win situation, making sure that the country goes forward and so on. But South Africa doesn't have a long-standing history, in my opinion, of coalition arrangements, because the first coalition arrangement that rose to prominence was in 1924 between the National Party and the PAC government, and then the second one was in 1933. And then after that, the National Party, as you might know, dominated the political landscape until the ANC rose to prominence and then got, affected by a downward electoral trajectory in 2016.
All right then, Professor, just before I let you go, if you were to predict, what coalition do you think would work for the South African political sphere?
That is a $1 million question. I'll tell you why. Because in the lineup, you've got three political parties, namely the ANC, which is sitting at 40% on the dot. And then you have the DA. You see, there are strong points and weaknesses of that possible coalition arrangement because there is a perception, and sometimes politics is a game of perceptions, that the DA is a party that preserves white privileges. Whether that is right or wrong, that is not the issue. So if the ANC joins forces with the DA, some of its voters might feel betrayed. I mean, in general, as you might know, coalition arrangements are not a byproduct of a democracy. Well, people don't vote for coalition arrangements, but they vote for political parties. But political parties, they join forces with other political parties without the knowledge of their voters. But there are other specificities. For instance, the ANC supports Palestine, the DA supports Israel. And I don't think there will be a compromise on that score. The other issue is that in South Africa, because of our history, the ANC has tried to level the playing field by introducing like affirmative action. The DA doesn't support that because they say they are colorblind, and that policy, sidelines some people and so on. We have also another policy to empower Black people called broad based Black economic empowerment. They are also critical of that. So there might be discontentment amongst Black voters. There are also other policies that people might not be happy with that the DA normally criticize. But on the other hand, if they join forces, the market forces will support them, because the DA has a slant of neoliberalism. Now, if you look at the other party, the one of Jacob Zuma, they have made a demand that they don't want the president of the ANC to be the president of the country because of a long-standing bad blood between the president of the ANC and the president of Umkhonto weSizwe, which is Jacob Zuma. I don't think there will be a compromise on that score. The possible one is the one with the EFF, because the EFF is also a breakaway of the ANC. I think that one is workable, even though there might be a backlash from the market forces.
Yes, and we see the EFF, calling for the resignation as one of its conditions, merging with the ANC, but we don't know how that would go. But thank you so much, Professor Nsikelelo Breakfast. A whole lot more to discuss, and we hope to speak with you some other time. Thank you so much, political analyst from Eastern Cape. Welcome back to the program. Famine in Sudan is imminent if aid agencies continue to be prevented from providing relief. This is according to UN humanitarian agencies, who warn that further obstacles to providing aid rapidly and at scale to those in need in Sudan will mean that more people will die. In a bleak assessment of the dire situation in the country, where the conflict is in its second year, the heads of 19 global humanitarian organizations issued an alert announced by the UN Aid Coordinator Office spokesperson Ian Lurk.
19 global humanitarian organizations, including 12 UN agencies, today warned that if they continue to be prevented from providing aid in Sudan rapidly and at scale, a famine will likely take hold in large parts of the country. More people will flee to neighboring countries, children will succumb to disease and malnutrition, and women and girls will face even greater suffering and dangers. Movements across conflict lines to parts of Khartoum, Darfur, Al Jazeera and Kordofan have been cut off since mid-December. In March and April of this year, nearly 860,000 people were denied humanitarian aid in these areas. We, of course, want these generals to find a way to solve their differences, not by violence that kills, maims, rapes, whatnot, hundreds of thousands of people in Sudan, but do it in another way.
The Economic Community of West African States, ECOWAS, has allocated $9 million to aid refugees, internally displaced persons, and stateless individuals in its member nations, with Nigeria receiving $1 million to assist terrorism victims in the northeast. This was disclosed at the 2024 ECOWAS Ambassadors Retreat, which held in partnership with the United Nations High Commissioner for Refugees in Port Harcourt, the Rivers State capital. Our correspondent, Deborah Agbalama, reports.
This year's retreat, organized by the UNHCR and ECOWAS, has in attendance ECOWAS ambassadors with the theme enhancing protection for refugees, IDPs, and stateless persons in West Africa and finding solutions to forced displacements. In their opening remarks, the organizers emphasized the need to address forced displacements caused by violence, political instability, and climate change. Discussions also highlighted the recent alliance of Sahel states, AES, by Mali, Niger, and Burkina Faso, and their withdrawal from ECOWAS.
It is now the opportunity to call the attention of the humanitarian situation in the Sahel, in the Lake Basin for part of it, but also in West Africa.
Speaking to journalists, the organizers explained the efforts taken in the West African region by the United Nations and ECOWAS in the protection and provision for refugees and IDPs.
ECOWAS has provided $1 million for victims of terrorism in the northeastern Nigeria, and a steering committee has been set up by the Minister of Humanitarian Affairs to see how they will disperse those funds through the World Food Program and the Red Cross.
Highlighting the sufferings of refugees and displaced persons, Ehini Vera Voise, a Cameroonian refugee representing refugees in the South Nigeria, urged donors to continue their support.
Appeal from UNHCR and all the ambassadors from ECOWAS and all the well-wishers that have been donating to support the refugees, they should have pity on the refugees. The refugees are going through a lot. There is hunger in the settlement, there is starvation, there is hardship. They should at least find a means in which they can help the refugees in any way that the refugees can at least stand on their feet again.
And it's a wrap for the two-day meeting of ambassadors from ECOWAS countries. And while this meeting put together by UNHCR and ECOWAS, basically discussing the way forward in the next 3 years until they have their next meeting. And topping the agenda is the fact that they're looking at policies for member states where refugees can get to be residents, or better still, naturalized in these countries where they are camping. Well, that's not all. They're also looking at the possibility of better provision for those who are in IDP camps. A lot has been done by their donors, but more still to be done, as there are 7 million vulnerable people living out there looking for help in the region. From Port Harcourt, the Rivers State capital, where this meeting held, Deborah Balama, Channels Television News.
Still in West Africa, Senegal's President Bassirou Diomaye Faye is suggesting a possible window of openness for dialogue between Burkina Faso and ECOWAS after meeting with the West African nation's transitional leader Ibrahim Traoré during his first visit to Ouagadougou. President Faye's comments come after coup hit Burkina Faso and its neighbors, Mali and Niger, announced back in January that they would be leaving the Economic Community of West African States, ECOWAS, to form a defense and cooperation pact known as Alliance of Sahel States. Africa's youngest elected president adds that Senegal, a member of the 15-nation ECOWAS bloc, would continue to work on both sides towards possible areas of convergence. During his election campaign, Mr. Faye had promised to bring junta-run Mali, Burkina Faso and Niger back into the ECOWAS. He has also visited Bamako, where he met with the transitional head, Colonel Assimi Goïta. And finally, on the program, Russian Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov has arrived in Guinea's capital, Conakry, for an official visit marking the beginning of his latest African tour. Footage from this morning shows Guinean Foreign Minister Morisanda Kouyaté greeting Mr. Lavrov at the airport as the diplomats descended the stairs. According to Russian media, it's Mr. Lavrov's first working visit to Guinea since 2013. The Russian diplomat is expected to hold bilateral talks with the country's leadership. The state-run TASS news agency in Russia reported that Guinea would be a part of a larger tour of African countries, but did not specify what other nations on the continent Mr. Lavrov plans to visit. And that's it on the program today. Thank you so much for watching. I'm Layo Olarinde. See you again tomorrow.